Good day, everyone. Today, I want to speak to you about a profound truth from the Bible that has the power to change the way we perceive our struggles, our limitations, and our weaknesses. The topic is strength in weakness. Let's reflect on the powerful words from 2 Corinthians 12, faithful word. 12:9. But he said to me, My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. At the heart of this verse is a revelation that challenges our human instincts. In the world, weakness is often viewed as something negative, something to be avoided or hidden. We live in a culture that celebrates self-reliance, physical strength, and unshakable confidence. Yet, God's kingdom operates differently. In His eyes, our weakness is not a liability. It is an opportunity for His power to be fully revealed in us. The Apostle Paul's example. Let's begin by looking at the Apostle Paul, who wrote these words in 2 Corinthians. Paul was a man who had every reason to boast about his spiritual achievements. He had encountered Christ on the road to Damascus, spread the gospel across the Roman Empire, and planted churches in hostile environments. Yet, despite all this, Paul had what he called a thorn in his flesh, a form of weakness or affliction that he prayed to be removed. 3 times Paul pleaded with God to take this thorn away, but God's answer was clear. My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. God did not remove the thorn, but He gave Paul something greater, His sustaining grace, and the promise that His strength would be perfected in Paul's weakness. Paul then declared that he would boast all the more in his weaknesses, so that Christ's power might rest on him. What a powerful shift in perspective! What does it mean for us? How often do we view our weaknesses as obstacles to success or happiness? Whether it's physical illness, emotional struggles, insecurities, or difficult circumstances, we often feel that our weaknesses hold us back. But God wants to remind us that it is precisely in these moments that His power is magnified. When we come to the end of ourselves, when we can no longer rely on our own strength, that's when we can fully depend on God's strength. Think about it. God's grace is sufficient. No matter how inadequate we feel, God's grace is more than enough. His grace covers our shortcomings, and His power compensates for our lack. It is in those moments when we feel empty, broken, and incapable that we experience the fullness of His grace. His power is made perfect in weakness. This means that God's strength reaches its full expression when we acknowledge our weaknesses. Our frailty becomes the canvas upon which He paints His glory. When we let go of the need to appear strong, we give God room to demonstrate His supernatural power in our lives. This principle is not just theoretical, it's illustrated throughout the Bible. Gideon. In the book of Judges, Gideon felt like the least of his clan and the weakest in Israel when God called him to lead an army. Despite his hesitation and doubts, God chose Gideon because of his weakness. With just 300 men, Gideon defeated a massive army, showing that the victory was not by human strength, but by God's power. Judges 6-7. David and Goliath. David, a young shepherd boy, defeated the giant Goliath not with armor or physical strength, but with faith in God. In his weakness and small stature, God's strength was fully revealed. 1 Samuel 17. Moses. When God called Moses to lead the Israelites out of Egypt, Moses protested that he was not eloquent and couldn't speak well. But God reassured Moses that He would be with him and empower him for the task. Through Moses' weakness, God's deliverance was made known. Exodus 3-4. These examples remind us that God does not call the qualified. He qualifies the called. He chooses the weak things of the world to shame the strong and the foolish things to confound the wise. Certrithian Keen 1:27. In each of these stories, human weakness set the stage for divine intervention. Embracing our weaknesses. So how do we embrace this truth in our own lives? First, we must recognize that our limitations are not a reason for despair, but a reason for hope. When we are weak, God is strong. It's when we stop striving in our strength and begin leaning into God's grace that we experience real transformation. Let's put this into practice. In times of personal failure, remind yourself that God's grace is sufficient for you. His love does not waver because of your mistakes. Instead, your failures are an opportunity for His redemption to shine through. When you feel overwhelmed by life's challenges, remember that God's strength is available to you. Like Paul, we can boast in our weaknesses because they are the very areas where God will show up mightily. In moments of physical or emotional weakness, know that God has not abandoned you. Like Gideon, David, and Moses, He is ready to work through your limitations to accomplish great things. My friends, let us not shy away from our weaknesses, but embrace them, knowing that in those moments, God's power is made perfect. The world tells us to hide our struggles, but the Bible tells us to boast in them, for they are the pathways to God's strength. Remember that His grace is sufficient for you, and His power will shine brightest in your moments of greatest need. As we walk in this truth, we can face life with confidence, not confidence in ourselves, but in the God who works through us. Let us be like Paul, who declared, "For when I am weak, then I am strong." 2 Corinthians 12:2. Through Christ, we find the strength to endure, the courage to persevere, and the grace to overcome. Thank you.